Big Astrology, Mare Tranquillitatis, the Moon, 1969. Opening the forward hatch of Apollo 11's lunar module, Commander Neil Armstrong descended the ladder to a dusty patch within a large, featherless region of the Moon's surface called Mare Tranquillitatis, the Sea of Tranquility. Admission timestamp 109:24:15, corresponding in Eastern Daylight Time to Sunday, July 20, 10:56 p.m. and 15 seconds. Armstrong's boat made contact with the Moon for the very first time in the history of our species. A human being had set foot on another world. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Armstrong's words at the moment left nothing unsaid. The Apollo 11 moon landing answered the hopes of 1,000 generations of stargazers and cosmic dreamers. It was a voyage which astronomy and astrology had begun together. For millennia, astrology had provided the primary motivation for improving the accuracy of planetary observations. But like the first stage of the Apollo spacecraft's Saturn V rocket, once its contribution was spent, it became a dead weight that needed to be jettisoned in order to enable any further ascent. And what an ascent it was! Apollo 11 will forever be remembered as a marvel of engineering, organization and vision. And its success demonstrated that sophisticated astronomical models were capable of predicting certain types of future events, like the positions and forces between the Earth and the Moon, to an almost unbelievable level of precision. Meanwhile, back on the Earth, astrology was riding the crest of a popular revival, so much so that its global appeal at the moment was slightly greater than it had ever been at any time in the past. Who could have predicted that? Occultation. In astronomical observations, it sometimes happens that your line of sight to a star, planet, or satellite gets blocked by the passage of another celestial body. This is called occultation. In an analogous fashion, the rise of the new astronomy during the 1600s and the increasing brilliance of each new telescopic discovery caused astrology to dim by comparison. It wasn't that astrology was inherently incompatible with these new developments. At a much more basic level, astrology was exhausted. Despite the centuries of endless searching, 17th century astrologers could not point to a single unequivocal correlation between the planet's positions and anyone's personal destiny. Meanwhile, for the very first time, those who loved numbers had options. The burgeoning professions of surveying, cartography, banking, insurance, and of course astronomy all needed mathematicians. Petrarch's friend, the reluctant astrologer Minor Maineri, could only have sighed in envy. Even the astrological almanac trade, which had been astrology's most public medium, like it was culminated during the 1600s. At mid-century, the astrologer William Lilly had become a meteoric publishing sensation by seeming to predict and encourage the victories of Parliament during the English Civil War. Recall that it's through Lily's lively writing that the horoscope can become more readily a symbol of heaven. But politics in the long run has a way of making votes of its forecasters, be they 17th century astrologer casting horoscopes or 21st century analyzed running, running sophisticated statistical models. As this court turned to revolution led to regicide. Regicide inaugurated a republic, and republic reverted to one-man rules. To one-man rule, Lily's almanac somehow managed to stay one step ahead. Here, the subsequent turn of events, the collapse of the protectorate and the restoration of King Charles II in 1660 was something that Lily simply could not or would not foresee. The magnitude of this epoch-making episode was so great, Lily protested that no one could have predicted it. It had been an act above NATO. Sales of Lily's almanac, which had peaked at 30,000 copies per year during the 1650s, quickly slumped and never recovered. At least the 17th century public, it can be said to their credit, didn't hesitate to damn their underperforming political prognosticators. Whether regarded as a high-minded endeavor or merely as a platform for popular superstition, astrology is visibly diminished significantly during the 18th and 19th centuries by the celestial body in occultation doesn't cease to exist. It's still there, ready to appear whenever the object that's blocking it gets displaced. And sure enough, by the turn of the 20th century, there were plenty of people who had grown dissatisfied with the unchecked advances of science, industry, that new breed of now it all known by the newly coined name of scientists. Of all the anti-science movements to emerge, the one that seems to me to have been the most successful, in no small part because its influence remains so poorly known, held its inaugural meeting on November 17, 1875 in the Lecture Hall at 64 Madison Avenue in New York City. This was the birth of the Theosophical Society, the branch of a Russian-born spiritualist named Helena Pendovna Blavatsky. Like previous mystical groups, the Theosophists claim that all of the world's religions and all of the science's recent discoveries were merely the superficial expressions of an ancient wisdom whose deeper truths had been purposefully kept hidden from unready world. What made theosophy new and different, however, was not into the usual stew of Kabbalistic, Pythagorean, and Neoplatonist teachings. Blavatsky added a heaping spoonful of Hindu and Buddhist notions, which had only recently been introduced to the West. But how to make a sense of it all? Miraculously, Blavatsky claimed to have access to a secret to a secret book written in a sacred language which revealed at long last the hidden connections between man and the cosmos. It thus became Blavatsky's calling, and the calling of the Theosophical Society to reconstitute these ancient truths and to prepare the world for the dawn of the new cycle, which she prophesied would begin sometime in the early 20th century. Theosophy's message was timely, given the choice between the soulless, machine-like universe of Western science and the dogmatic certainties of Western religion. Many people increasingly opted for neither. Theosophy promised an happening way out, science and spirituality could be reconciled, but the path for doing so led to the east, to the Theosophist. There were the Christian literalists were just as blinkered as the scientists who insisted that the universe was nothing more than matter in motion and that man was nothing more than a Darwinian descendant of apes. In the Magnum Opus, the secret doctrine, the synthesis of science, religion, philosophy, Blavatsky neatly summarized her assumptions. The aim of this work may be thus stated: to show that nature is not a fortuitous concurrence of atoms, and to assign to man his rightful place in the scheme of the universe, to rescue from degradation the archaic truths which are the basis of all religions, and to uncover to some extent the fundamental unity from which they all spring. Finally, to show that the occult side of nature has never been approached by the science of modern civilization. Prominent among the archaic truths which Blavatsky wished to rescue from degradation, there was one whose practice in both India and the Western seemed, at least to Blavatsky, to offer evidence not of the cultural exchange of ideas, but rather of a set primordial heritage, astrology. And whether what Blavatsky could foresee it or not, mixing theosophy and astrology together would precipitate a radical transmutation of astrology's character, reshaping it into the form of what's recognized today. The individual most responsible for this change was an English astrologer and theosophist named William Frederick Allen, although the zodiacal pen name by which he is chiefly known Alan Leo. It was Leo who, more than anyone, shifted astrology's focus away from predictions in the material world and toward an elucidation of an individual's changing states of consciousness. Moreover, according to Leo, the best way to forecast how someone in the cosmos will respond to changes in the outer universe was to examine the person's own sign. This is your zodiac sign as you know it today, meaning the zodiac sign of the sun on your birthday. Traditionally, as we have discussed throughout this book, the sun sign was only one quantity among many that went into a birth horoscope, and by no means the most important. All of this changed with Alan Leo as Nicholas Champion, a historian of astrology and formerly the astrologer of the UK's Daily Mail, writes Alan Leo embarked of a program of deliberate invention without which modern astrology would be simply unrecognizable. From Alan Leo's astrological improvisations, it was a key progression to today's familiar format. There was two major milestones along the way, the first of which is well established. On August 24, 1930, the Sun Express in London became the first modern newspaper to publish a horoscope. It was a birth chart for the newborn Princess Margaret, younger sister to Queen Elizabeth, cast by the astrologer Richard Harold Nilow. There's always an exhilarating instant of surprise whenever predictions, however false, appear to be vindicated by subsequent events, however charitably selected. Thus, no organ of Margaret's horoscope can never omit the following premonition, even of tremendous importance to the royal family in the nation will come about near her 7th year, 1937, and these events will indirectly affect her own fortunes. Sure enough, Margaret's uncle Edward VIII abdicated the throne in 1936, which made Margaret's father, King George VIII, the sixth, Margaret's sister Elizabeth, heir to the throne, and Margaret served second in line. As for Nylo's other specific predictions, in the course of life, there will probably be some minor injury to the face of head, and she will marry rather suddenly about the 24th or 26th year, but as the result of an attachment of long-standing. Well, now who wants to ruin the fun by bringing this up? Naylor's forecast proved popular enough for the Sunday Express to reward him with a regular column. Yet, however transiting his horoscope was, Naylor's accompanying has catch seemed remarkably old-fashioned, just like Cardano's horoscope for King Henry VIII. Naylor's birth chart for Princess Margaret displayed the configuration of the planets and zodiac signs within the 12th house of heaven at the precise time and place of her birth. But this highly personalized format was solicited for a mass readership. Royal babies notwithstanding, there would simply ever be enough celebrity fans to fill up a weekly column this way. The solution to this problem and the final milestone on the road to today's astrology was the development of the popular 12-paragraph horoscope arranged according to the zodiac sign. It's not entirely clear who first invented this format. Nicolas Champion traces it to a Detroit-based magazine of 1930s called Modern Astrology and the influence of the theosophically inspired transpersonal astrologer Danny Rudyard. Whatever its origins, the format spread rapidly, and newspaper astrologers have begun incorporating it into their columns by the end of the decade. For the publishing industry, the 12-paragraph horoscope was an instant classic. The simplified format proved a perfect fit for print-based mass media, striking just the right balance between specificity and generality. It's fascinating to consider that a single blanket prediction addressed to the whole world would certainly have been rejected by readers as too impersonal. Yes, splitting humanity up into just 12 factions is, apparently, enough to establish an enduring sense of group identity. Would seven groups have worked, or 50, who knows? But the stunning success of the 12 sign system speaks for itself. No matter how silly or how serious you think it is, unless you've been living under a rock your whole life, you almost certainly know your zodiac sign. From a marketing perspective, therefore, the simple switch to sun signs has made astrology's brand awareness practically total. But the introduction of a new and popular format does not, by itself, fully account for why astrology became so popular during the 20th century. A more complex explanation, I believe, would note that astrology was star among many within a larger and tremendously popular constellation, the rejection of materialism. By materialism, I don't mean the idea that we buy too much stuff, however true this may be, but rather the metaphysical stance in the tradition of thinkers like Lucretius that the universe consists of nothing more than matter in motion is the bed of spiritual causes and effects, or to spell out the implications of materialism more bluntly, that there is no God or gods or goddesses in whatever form you may imagine he, she, it, or they to be. The usual opponent of materialism had always been organized religion, but the serious threatened religion received during the 19th century created a void into which, which new dresses, which new dresses, which new ideas, as well as all India's repackaged in new forms could emerge. Out to one side, movements like Marxism doubled down on a radical materialist stance. Meanwhile, there's a strong case to be made that the earliest, the best organized, and the most influential movement to ready the misfit sense of spirituality outside of organized religion was theosophy. Although the original Theosophical Society of Madame Blavatsky splintered after her death in 1891, it's difficult to overstate the influence her followers have had on the intellectual currents of the 20th and 21st centuries. Most immediately, the Theosophists were at the forefront of popularizing Buddhism and Eastern meditation, but meditation practices in the West, less directly and in a much more sinister vein. Blavatsky's fixation with the spiritual destiny of the Aryan fifth root race, descendants, she claimed, of the inhabitants of Atlantis, exerted an unneighable influence via occultist groups like the Thule Society on the ideology of Nazism. By far and away, the most significant legacy of Theosophy was to implant the idea that a spiritual revolution was imminent, one that would overthrow the materialist understanding of the world and usher in a new age in which the mystic intuitions of antiquity, astrology included, would be vindicated by a new and spiritual science. This was a sentiment which galvanized more than just daydreamers and soul searchers. Artists especially felt called to form the vanguard of this uprising. No less a painter than Vasily Kandinsky, for instance, speaks in explicitly these terms and praises the Theosophical Society by name in his modern manifesto concerning the spiritual in art. In sympathy with modernism's wide spasms of color, the vision of New Age is a proposition that either compels or fails to compel holistically. Its broad and provocative brushstrokes and are the message. The content of any individual detail few appears is irrelevant. In this regard, astrology might be true or it might be false, but symbolically it serves as a shorthand for acknowledging a non-material plane of existence. And insofar as many 20th century artists do not feel obligated to respect a strict correspondence between symbols and their literal meanings. Indeed, just the opposite, astrology can pop up, perhaps for no fixed reason at all, in a sculpture by Max Ernst, a poem by Sylvia Plath, or the jazz of John Coltrane. Whatever such artists may have wanted to say with astrology, the cumulative effect of their creations has been to deepen astrology's resonances in our culture. My unfavorite example of this is Gustav Holst's The Planets. Holst conceived the musical sweep of this composition in a burst of enthusiasm after a friend introduced him to astrology. He even purchased a copy of Alan Leo's What is a Horoscope and How is it Cast for psychological insights into each planet's character. And although one less than impressed critic has described the resulting music as a banal trumpety thump 1916 orgy, the suite is still widely performed, widely recorded, and also widely referenced in modern movie sources. Most famously of all, the ostinato or trumpety thumb in Mass or the Bringer of War echoes throughout John Williams' soundtrack to the Star Wars films. In fact, a few bands can be heard, and most note for note in the opening minutes of the original 1977 movie. On the weather side is radioactive. New Age influences in pop culture are pretty easy to find once you know where to look, but New Age influences in science, Madame Blavatsky threw down the gauntlet when she wrote The Occult Side of Nature has never been approached by the science of modern civilization. Would anyone rise to the challenge? In fact, throughout the 20th century, plenty of scientists set out to thoroughly examine occult phenomena such as telekinesis, precognition, and extrasensory perception (ESP), and quite a few of these studies were pursued at the world's most prestigious research universities. Remarkably, one of the last results of this type of work The Princess Engineering Anomalous Research Laboratory appeared on the close-up show in 2007. But so long as science bases findings on the miserable universe only, while should its conclusions have any ability in the unmiserable universe beyond, the proper guide to the New Age cosmos, therefore, could never be the scientist. It had to be some more spiritually sensitive, someone much more like a shaman. Not surprisingly, there were not many professional scientists eager to abandon a hard-won allegiance to skepticism, empiricism, and objectivity in favor of what was, essentially, a vision of science. I say not many, however, since there were certainly some who proved all too happy to affect another worldly persona. Yet I can think of only one whose scientific prestige, such as it was, could be said to derive especially from his excursions into the cult. This was the Swiss psychoanalyst Carl Jung, whose glory of the boundaries between science and shamanism left a legacy of encouraging and to some extent legitimizing the ideals of the New Age within the scientific mainstream. Jung had been fascinated by spiritualism even before he began his medical practice, but to the horror of his sometime mentor Sigmund Freud, Jung started to see occult traditions like astrology as holding the key to unlocking the unconscious mind. In a letter to Freud dated June 12, 1911, Jung laid bare his thinking. My evenings are taken up very largely with astrology. I made horoscopic calculations in order to find a clue to core or psychological truth. So remarkable things have turned up, which will certainly appear incredible to you. I dare say that we shall one day discover in astrology a good deal of knowledge that has been intuitively projected into the heavens. For instance, it appears that the signs of the zodiac are characters pictures. In other words, libido symbols which depict the typical qualities of the libido at given moment. This is essentially a restatement of Alan Leo's piece Psychological Astrology, albeit couched in more sophisticated language. Yet, far from a youthful extravagance, Jung's enthusiasm for astrology only deepened during his career, influencing his theory of synchronicity and buttressing his later conviction that astrology represents the summation of all the psychological knowledge of antiquity taken at face value. Jung's astrological writings would seem to suggest that nobody can become a competent psychoanalyst without first becoming an expert astrologer. I very much doubt that this is a widely held opinion among professional therapists today. Yet the converse opinion that every good astrologer must also be a good psychoanalyst is pretty much the default among modern astrologers and their clients alike. For the professional astrologer, this represents a tremendous job promotion. A classical astrologer was, first and foremost, a human calculator, one whose most important qualification was his ability to solve long and tedious mathematical equations. By contrast, the modern astrologer is built as a full-fledged spiritual guide, one whose chief professional claim is a hidden intuition into psychic vibration of the cosmos. Modern astrology, which is profoundly influenced by Jung, took the hint that in order to thrive in the New Age, it has an opportunity to reinvent itself as a spiritual science. The physical sciences, meanwhile, never did find any use for their would-be shamans. On the contrary, it was through the traditional methods of careful observation and testing that science was opening up new and unimagined vistas into the unknown. Or to put it another way, 20th century science was getting well enough on its own without having to channel the occult. Leading the way, wa- leading the way was physics. The dual developments of relativity and quantum mechanics forced a radical rethinking of space, time, matter, and measurement. And to top it all off, there was the serendipitous discovery which needed both relativity and quantum mechanics to explain, and which to a remarkable degree has determined the direction of physics research ever since. This was the discovery of ionizing radiation, meaning the radiation that is powerful enough to break apart matter. Nothing like it had ever been seen before that much scientists could agree upon. The Nobel Committee of 1901 therefore didn't have to think too hard about who should receive the very first prize in physics. It went to Wilhelm Röntgen for his discovery of X-rays and their supernatural seeming ability to image his bones straight through his skin. In his succession, Henri Becquerel and then Marie and Pierre Curie found a similar but spontaneous behavior in uranium, radium, polonium, and other exotic elements hauled up from the mines. Yet it's not down into the earth but up toward the heavens that our story will take us. Because no matter how diligently these researchers yielded the radioactive sources, some amount of ionizing radiation could always be missed. Where was it coming from? A surprising answer arrived in 1912 via hot air balloon and courtesy of an Austrian physicist named Victor Hess. Contrary to all expectations, Hess detected higher and higher radiation levels. The higher he and his balloon ascended, thunderstorms and other atmospheric processes were quickly ruled out. Whatever this anomalous radiation was, it wasn't coming from the Earth. A new name soon summed up all that was known at the time that was being bombarded by cosmic rays. The discovery of cosmic rays was only the latest and strangest indication that space was a lot less empty and a lot more violet than had once been believed. Starting with Tycho supernova in 1572, astronomers had been coding the cosmos with an ever-expanding cast of unexpected entities. Most dramatically of all, two enormous and entirely new planets were detected beyond Saturn, Uranus in 1781 and Neptune in 1846. An additional gas giant named Planet X was, for a time, hypothesized to account for some quakes in the orbits of Neptune and Uranus. When Pluto was discovered in 1930, it was initially assumed to be this predicted large named planet. Subsequent observation, however, revealed that Pluto wasn't massive at all. In fact, it's smaller than its fellow Kuiper belt object Eris and only about 14 times heavier than Ceres, the largest of the asteroids. And so in 2006, the International Astronomical Union voted to demote Pluto to a dwarf planet, making it merely the second largest of the rest of the nearly 1 million catalogued minor planets which orbit the Sun. Yet, for every never before seen space oddity attracting the attention of astronomers, the old familiar celestial bodies still had plenty of wonders of their own in store. Almost as soon as Galileo turned his telescope to the heavens, astronomers discovered that Jupiter has moons, Saturn has rings, and the Sun has, well, there really isn't any better name for it. The Sun has spots. These dark sunspots appear and disappear on the Sun's surface and rotate together with the rest of the Sun around the Sun's internal axis about once every 25 days. In the mid-1800s, a German astronomer named Heinrich Schwabe realized that the number and intensity of these sunspots increased and decreased over a fairly regular 11-year cycle. Figure 10.3. Impressed by this thing, Rudolf Wolf in Zurich, Switzerland, began the modern era of systematic daily sunspot cuts. Using historical records, Wolf was able to extend his sunspot series back to the year 1749, with 1755 marking the beginning of what is now called solar cycle 1. It's possible tested. The sunspot recalled all the way to the first telescopic observations of the sun in 1610, although not surprisingly these data are less consistent than those from later periods. Sunspots provide an external visual clue to the sun's internal surroundings. The rise and fall of the sunspot count during each 11-year solar cycle corresponds to a rise and fall in overall solar activity. Here on Earth, this is manifested primarily through increased geomagnetic disturbances, interference in certain radio signals, and an increase in the frequency and the range of the northern and southern auroras. Plate 16. The total sunlight emitted by the sun also peaks with the solar cycle, although the variation amounts to only a small portion, about 0.1% of the sun's baseline heating power. Like the medieval chronologists organized the history of the world according to the 20-year conjunction cycle of Jupiter and Saturn, scientists have looked for correlations between the 11-year solar cycle and various happenings here on Earth. William Herschel, who is briefly famous for the discovery of Uranus, tried to correlate sunspot counts with the red prices published in Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations. Herschel's basic idea was that more sunspots meant warmer weather and therefore higher red seeds and lower red prices. More advantageously, the Soviet scientist Alexander Sisevsky suggested the mass uprisings like riots and revolutions are matched to a sunspot rhythm. The correlation that has received the most scientific support, even if the link remains speculative, is that the two record periods of extended below average sunspot numbers, the Maunder minimum and the Dalton minimum, the Maunder minimum and Dalton minimum line up with known periods of extended cold weather. In particular, the Maunder minimum, which overlaps almost perfectly with the reign of the French King Louis XIV, is thought to be connected with a climatological cooling event known as the Little Ice Age. Whether this represents a real effect or merely coincidence, we can still make the perfectly virtual observation that France's so-called Sun King presided, ironically, over a period of unusual low solar activity. As for 2019, we have arrived at the tail end of solar cycle 24. It was a comparatively weak solar cycle and part of a tentative trend, starting with solar cycle 22 of diminishing sunspot counts. Whether solar cycle 25 will be strong or weak, and whether this will have any implications for the Earth's climate remains anybody's guess. This uncertainty about our nearest stellar neighbor is very typical. In fact, some of the sun's most remarkable features remain entirely unknown right up until the dawn of the space age. For instance, during the 1950s, the American astrophysicist Eugene Park was trying to understand why comet tails always point away from the sun. His explanation completely untended the concept of empty space. The sun, Parker theorized, was emitting not just light and heat, but also a supersonic stream of charge and magnetized particles which spread out and fill up the solar system. The existence of this outflow, now called the solar wind, was decisively confirmed by satellite measurements in the late 1950s and early 1960s. Thus, far from the stainless golden days of which the sun turns out to be more like a roaring, smoking, speeding bonfire. Its heat, the solar irradiance, and smoke, the solar wind, peak every 11 years or so, accompanied by increased crackling sunspots, bright flashes, solar flares, tongues of flame, solar prominences, and even the occasional hurling of a burning log, a coronal mass ejection. For the most part, the Earth's atmosphere, that magnetic field keep us well protected from the sun's stormy temperament. But satellites and spacecraft remain very much exposed. This is why the space nations maintain facilities dedicated to monitoring and, to the limited extent possible, predicting space weather. But back to our earlier mystery, cosmic rays. All of these discoveries point to the sun as the source line, surprisingly no. Although the sun does contribute some of the weaker rays, the relationship is actually the reverse. Cosmic radiation decreases with increasing solar activity. The solar wind, it turns out, provides an extra layer of shielding which, at its most intense, significantly reduces the amount of cosmic radiation reaching the Earth. Thus, to further stretch an already overextended metaphor, cosmic rays are like constant swarm of mosquitoes which can be repelled, at least somewhat, by the smoke from our solar bonfire. Yet, if the sun isn't the main source of cosmic rays, then what is? This has been one of the great detective stories of modern astrophysics. But with increasing conviction, scientists keep coming back to the same suspect, supernovas. Not all supernovas, mind you, mainly supernovas like Tychos, whose remnants are located within our own Milky Way galaxy. These spectacular stellar explosions have all the requisite pilots to account for the bulk of the cosmic rays we receive on Earth. In fact, one of the earliest and most revealing clues was that these so-called rays are actually made up of charged particles, photons mainly about 90%, some helium nuclei about 9%, and speaking of the innards of every other element of periodic table, all accelerated across the galaxy close to the speed of light. This last point turns out to be vital because in the early universe, this last point turns out to be vital because in the early universe, right after the Big Bang, the only elements which had been created were hydrogen and helium. Every other element had to be formed over billions of years in the nuclear furnace of a star. The supernovas are not merely the memorials to long dead stars. The destructive violence also seeds the cosmos with all the materials needed for the next generation of stars, planets, and even life itself. This is a process which the astronomer Carl Sagan describes so unforgettably in his wonderful 1930s television series Cosmos. Our Sun is probably a third generation star, except for hydrogen and helium. Every atom in the Sun and the Earth was synthesized in other stars. The silicon in the rocks, the oxygen in the air, the carbon in our DNA, the gold in our banks, the uranium in our arsenals were all made thousands of light years away and billions of years ago. Our planet, our society, we ourselves are made of star stuff. Supernovas have given us the star stuff out of which we are made. Supernovas also show us in the cosmic radiation there is an invisible but constant accompaniment to life on Earth. In fact, cosmic rays deliver on average about 0.3 millisieverns per person per year, or about 10% of the natural ionizing radiation we are subjected to at all times simply by being alive. Rather, in the air we breathe across for much of the rest. For the most part, the human body is pretty good at repairing this type of low level damage, but it's escapable that some cosmic rays will induce mutations in our cells, both benign and non-benign. And when you consider that cosmic rays have been bombarding the Earth for the entirety of its 4.5 billion year yes, billion year history, and that their intensity, ebbs and flows according to cosmic cycles of which we are only dimly aware. The implication suddenly becomes startling. Of the stars, be modulating the tempo of our biological evolution all along. We are made from the stars, and perhaps even so softly we are shaped by the stars as well. Once again, it was Sagan who said it best. The evolution of life on Earth is driven in part through mutations by the death of distant stars. We are, in a very deep sense, tied to the cosmos. The discovery of the interplay between supernovas, the solar cycle, and cosmos has taught us that Earth is a planetary bubble untouchable by the faraway stars. Today we recognize that we are, and we have always been, creatures of the cosmos. This awareness that our lives are influenced by events in the wider universe has been the basic intuition of astrology from the beginning. Modern science, it must be admitted, has vindicated this intuition, even as so often happens, not at all in the way it was originally imagined. As we know how, it's not the planets which generate the cosmic rays that subtly influence our lives, but the radioactive remnants of supernovas in the far corners of the galaxy. Astronomers would love to be able to trace these rays back to specific sources in the sky, like Tycho supernova remnant in the constellation of Cassiopeia, or the Cape Nebula, which the remnant of the supernova of 1054 in the constellation Taurus. Unfortunately, the magnetic fields of the Earth, Sun, and the stellar space scramble the directions of these rays before they enter our atmosphere. This is what makes pinpointing the origin so difficult. Yet for the same reason, how crazy is it to imagine a scenario in which the two planets in our solar system, the largest magnetic fields, Jupiter and Saturn, subtly modulate the incoming flows of cosmic rays according to their positions relative to the Earth and the Sun. Might it be possible, therefore, for these planets to exert a small but critical influence on, say, some particular weather pattern here on Earth? This scenario is admittedly far-fetched, and yet it says something about our knowledge of the world. That a scenario which today is merely far-fetched would have been altogether inconceivable 100 years ago, but perfectly believable 1000 years ago. Perhaps certain cosmological ideas have cycles of their own, and like the skies we seek to explain, are destined to rise head and rise again for as long as we keep watching the stars. We are living in an empirical world. Against all odds, modern astrology has managed to make itself comfortably at home in modern astronomy stage and rapidly expanding universe. In fact, it comes to all of astronomy's new-found cosmic objects is the more the merrier, since its new heavenly body multiplies the total number of astrological possibilities to consider. A typical modern-day birth horoscope, for instance, will include not only the seven naked-eye planets, but also Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and possibly even a few small solar system bodies such as Chiron or Ceres. How do I know this? I went out and got my horoscope read, naturally. When I began this book, one of the things I became much curious to see was what the state-of-the-art professional horoscope looks like these days. And so, on a trip back to my home state of Arizona, I made sure to swing by the beautiful little town of Sedona, whose striking red rock vistas and so they say natural energy workspaces inspire a thriving New Age community of crystal healers and our readers, astrologers, and spiritual teachers of every persuasion, but from all but from all of Sedona's natural beauty, this the 21st century, and so I wasn't terribly surprised to discover that today's deluxe astrological reading begins indoors on a computer. Astrologers today have a whole galaxy of professional software packages to choose from, with celestially flashy names like Kepler, Sirius, and Solar Fire. All of these programs can compute and display the positions of the planets and other heavenly bodies. Quite a few can also generate fully automated reports and interpretations. Thus, the only information my astral guide for the afternoon needed from me was the day, time, and city of my birth, along with the name, my gender, and my sexual orientation. A few minutes later, I was handed a sleek-looking, personalized 30-page astrological report. On the cover of my report is a full-page diagram of my horoscope. Modern astrology programs provide multiple options for the visual look and feel of a horoscope, but the go-to style is the chart wheel, which is also what you'll find on most astrology websites. Mine shows a large cycle evenly divided by the 12 signs of the zodiac and evenly divided by the 12 classical houses of heaven, level 1 to 12. The planets are appropriately positioned near the outer rim of the wheel, with lines and symbols indicating the aspects to another figure 10.4. Incidentally, although chart wheel horoscopes occupy 2 dimensions on a piece of paper, they convey only 1 dimension of information, ecliptic longitude. In principle, therefore, they could be drawn just as sticks or a straight line. This is why for all of the themes of heavens in this book, I prefer the stereographic projection on astrolabe, which generates a proper mathematical map of both dimensions of the celestial sphere. The remainder of my astrological report explained what the configuration of the heavens and Bible had to say about my personality. For such a lengthy document, I was impressed at how fully fledged each pronouncement was, such that there were very few sentences in which I could not recognize at least some aspect of myself. This experience has been called the Barnum effect. For instance, since I'm a Taurus, I feel at home with people who prove to be friendly, affectionate, and gentle. Why yes, I do. And since Jupiter was ruling in the first house, I am very attracted to traveling and have great desire to discover every part of the world. This impulse could lead to frequent travels of many changes of residence. Hey, not bad. Of course, these reports are meant to serve merely as conversation starters. An intuitive interlocutor will have no trouble zeroing in on the topics that are most relevant to me and proceeding from there. And a birth chart can be just the beginning. I could have stayed to hear the various chapters of my life analyzed in terms of astrological transits and progressions. But I was more interested in the mechanics of how the ancient craft of horoscope casting had been carried into the computer age. Therefore, in addition to my own birth report, I purchased one for Olivia Koski 14 minutes after me. Then another one for myself had been born 8 minutes later. It was identical to my original one, not surprisingly. Then a few more just for fun to give the friends and loved ones. And though the cost of these reports can up quickly, nonetheless I left the lofty little town of Sedona feeling richer in spirit than when I arrived. As perusing page after page of these astrological reports makes clear, astrology today is the best regarded as a flower of self-help, one focused primarily on personal and spiritual growth. This is all fine and good, and certainly one big advantage of making purely subjective pronouncements is that they can never really be wrong. But astrology occupies the spiritual high ground only, at the high cost of abandoning its original domain of expertise, namely making objective predictions about projected events. Astrology's application doesn't mean, however, that the forecasting field has now been left vacant. Far from it, the notion that formulate algorithms shall explain not just some things, but most things in our life remains as seductive as ever. Who needs the stars and planets anyway? Maybe, like in a good magic trick, they were just a form of misdirection all along. Almost of almost all of almost all of astrology's prognosticatory products have been replaced by newer and more scientific substitutes. In many cases, however, it's not altogether clear that these replacements are any better or even all that different from what astrology had to offer. For example, who hasn't encountered the ubiquitous Myers-Briggs type indicators, which diagnose personality type? In place of the 12 zodiac signs, Myers posits a system of four psychological processes, each with two opposing preferences: introspection, extrospection, sensing, intuition, thinking, feeling, judgment, perception. This gives a total of 12, 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 equals 16 personality types, which are denoted by the initial letter codes, for instance ISTG, ISTJ, or ENFP. The Myers-Briggs type indicator was developed in 1943 as an explicit application of Carl Jung's fourfold theory of personality types. Jung himself explicitly acknowledged that this fourfold division could trace its lineage back to the ancient theory of the four elements, the four humors, and the four astrological triplets associated with them. Thus, while the Myers-Briggs test isn't exactly astrology in this case, as many of its detractors like to joke, it isn't so far removed either. The situation is similar for politics, economics, and the weather. Just because astrology has fallen out of favor doesn't mean people won't still pay top dollar for what they hope to be a winning predicative formula. But you don't need to have an especially long memory to appreciate that even the latest and greatest forecasts in these fields can still be spectacularly wrong. Hence, the oft the oft-quoted quip by the economist Ezra Solomon: "The only function of economic forecasting is to make astrology look respectable." Have we gotten any better at characterizing large, complex, and highly random systems? Unfortunately, the old saying remains, are true today. As ever, it's tough to make predictions, especially about the future. So why then is astrology singled out as uniquely not respectable, having a poor record, while accuracy can be all there is? If it was, quite a few modern forecasting operations should have been shut down a long time ago. Or are we to believe that only astrology has attracted its share of swindlers and crooks? Several Russian tours of financial scandals would seem to argue otherwise. No, astrology has been the butt of scientific ridicule because it uses algorithms which seem completely arbitrary and which take as their inputs data that have no apparent connection to the effects being predicted and which cannot be justified from a scientific understanding of the underlying phenomena. Say for instance Bonatti Guido. Funnily enough, however, this describes pretty well the, the sort of algorithms increasingly being used in modern forecasting models today. In general, a predictive model can be constrained by the laws of a larger theory, or it can be purely empirical. a physics-based weather model, for instance, must respect the laws of thermodynamics and fluid mechanics. By contrast, a purely empirical model simply hunts around for the best algorithm to relate input data to the output data, whatever those data may be. An empirical data rain model, for example, might consist of nothing more than a best fit curve to historical precipitation data, without any assumptions of an underlying mechanism. Outside of some specialist cases in the physical sciences, however, there's rarely ever much theory with which to build a model. These days, though, there tends to be plenty of data. The easy availability of vast computerized records about pretty much anything, what's usually called big data, and the rise of machine learning algorithms to sift through it all, it's radically reshaping the entire enterprise of scientific modeling. Whereas existing, it seems, a brief age of triumphant theories. With big data and machine learning, what we know about the world and about ourselves is increasingly whatever our empirical models tells us. Astrological can likewise be approached as a purely empirical problem. Forget all the ancient theories and superstitions. Are there earthly data sets which correlate with the planets or aren't there during the 20th centuries? During the 20th century, several astrologers equipped with the newly developed tests and techniques of statistics set out to examine this question in precisely this way. This most provocative finding came from a French psychologist named Michael Mise Gauquelin. Beginning in 1955, Gauquelin claimed to have detected a small but statistically significant incidence of key planets appearing in the key houses in the horoscopes of eminent professionals. For athletes, it was Mars; for scientists, Saturn; and for actors, Jupiter. This observation, known as the Mars effect, would become astrology's last and most valiant bid for scientific legitimacy. Controversy over the claim dragged on for decades. One commentator in 1970 summed up the stakes. Both those who are for and against astrology in the broadest sense as a serious field for study recognize the importance of Gauquelin's work. It is probably not putting it too strongly to say that everything hangs on it. To the great disappointment of its promoters, however, the most recent attempts to replicate Gauquelin's findings, and particularly with datasets independent of Gauquelin's original sample, have failed to find any evidence of a Mars effect. While in the United States, astrological correlation chasers were looking to prove their point not with statistics but with cold hard cash. By beating the stock market, speculators like the mercurial W.D. Gunn in the early part of the 20th century claimed to have uncovered complex numerological and astrological patterns between the fluctuations of the financial markets. Sidestepping his more esoteric assertions, one thing Gandhi demonstrated was that even if you can quite beat the market, you might still be able to make a small fortune selling books and institutional courses teaching others how to do it. Today, there's no need to root and rummage or incidental correlations. Modern machine learning algorithms are correlation monsters. They can make pretty much any signal correlate with any other. To illustrate this, we can update financial astrology for tax. That's a bit more 21st century predicting the price of Bitcoin using a machine learning algorithm called a neural network. It's possible to devise a model that perfectly mimics Bitcoin's price history and that takes as its input data nothing more than the zodiac signs of the planets on any given day, figure 10.5. Thus, the close correlation surpasses you. Well, I'll admit there's a little sleight of hands here. The model we've trained to is so big, meaning that it has so many free parameters that it is essentially able to learn a spirit relationship for each individual data point without discovering any meaningful underlying pattern. Imagine connecting two data points with an overly complicated curve instead of a simple straight line, and you'll have the basic idea. The machine learning term for this is overfitting. It's entirely equivalent to the concept of a spurious correlation in both cases. What's implied is that if we were to sample more data, for instance, next year's prices, the correlation would quickly fall apart. Of course, the only way to really know how prescient this model is or isn't is to wait and see it. In the meantime, though, I'd suggest that the standard evidential disclaimer, past performance is no guarantee of future results, can be prudently assumed to extend the zodiac to the ability of modern machine learning algorithms to generate convincing looking correlations so easily makes it critical for all of us as data consumers to remain wary of what these models are really telling us. This is especially true given the tendency of media outlets to blur the differences between, on the one hand, a simulation or model prediction, and on the other, a real measurement of a real thing in the real world. Purely empirical models are no differently than the algorithms of medieval astrology provide no justification for how or why they're supposed to work. The risk then on relying on these models, absent any deeper understanding, is that you can be certain whether the correlations they are based on are genuine or not, and yet no special powers or clairvoyance are needed to foresee that our interaction with these sorts of increasingly opaque machine learning models is only set to accelerate. We've already outsourced to algorithms judgments about what mortgage we're eligible for from the bank, and how long we're expected to live, and at what cost. What with data and machine learning, our algorithms are becoming even more personal, recognizing our faces, deciphering our voices, vanishing our sentences, answering our questions, and ascertaining our shopping, reading, dining, and voting preferences. Today, there's a bit of gold rush to find new data sets that can be learned and turned into viable applications. Whenever my colleagues or I come across or was a kid a predictive model that seems especially dubious, it's not uncommon for us to describe it as basically astrology. This never meant as a compliment, and yet I confess it was in reflecting upon this insult I began to feel a really sympathy for these very old astrologers of ages past. It's a sympathy that has led in part to this book. Day in and day out, astrologers struggle to interpret the meanings of complex mathematical models centuries before the statistical tools were developed to assess whether those models meant anything at all. Hundreds of years from now, will our own age be similarly mocked, or perhaps merely pitied, for our feeble attempts to predict the future? Or just maybe, will our new breed of algorithms finally succeed where astrology has failed? Of how prepared are we to live in a world in which each of us has become dispiritingly predictable? What would it mean for our sense of self, not to mention our sense of justice, to conclude that not nature was driving our actions? On the plus side, I suppose there's a lot of unnecessary suffering we'd be able to avoid looking back at my own life.
I can think of many times I would have appreciated an algorithm to warn me which of my plans was destined to fail or which of my relationships was never meant to be. And yet had I been told from the beginning the path I was meant to follow, how could I have even set forth upon it without the experience of all my previous missteps? Not to err is human, and I don't foresee an algorithm ever truly learning what that means. Skepticism and wonder. The really breathtaking thing about our civilization collective knowledge is that every now and again those who have come before us have managed to link arguments and evidence together into chains and reasoning which are so compelling that they can convince even the most hardened skeptic of a fact that seems utterly and completely counterintuitive. In Plato's dialogue Meno, Socrates draws a diagram in the sand to convince a slave, one who knows absolutely nothing about geometry, the square's area can be doubled by counterintuitively drawing a new square upon the diagonal of the old one. During the scientific revolution, astronomers and physicists toiled for generations to demonstrate convincingly what was, and perhaps always will be, history's most outrageously counterintuitive claim that the Earth is not fixed but hurtling rapidly through space in an orbit around the Sun.
For many people today, modern astrology's basic claim that people's personalities can be meaningfully grouped according to the zodiac sign appear to be borne out by day-to-day experience. The counterclaim that these groupings have no actual meaning is therefore the counterintuitive one. The persistence of astrology shows how tenacious of pattern matching tendencies can be. Once the suggestion of a pattern has been made, in this case a suggestion first put forward thousands of years ago, it can be very difficult not to see evidence for it everywhere. Yet, astrology's persistence tells us something else, too, something that many seem unwilling to acknowledge. The arguments against astrology are evidently not nearly as compelling as Socrates' argument about how to double a square, or even the argument that the earth revolves around the sun. Why not? First of all, it should be noted that no direct evidence of Earth's motion was observed until the 19th century, when telescopes finally became powerful enough to measure stellar parallax. A conflict is settled, however, when opposition ceases. In this case, the religious institutions, which were the primary opponents of heliocentric cosmos, had already conceded the argument during the 1600s. What this sequence implies is that at popular level no one much cares whether the earth is moving or not. Otherwise this debate might have lingered on at least through the 19th century and not well into the space age. Yet people do care about astrology, its system of explaining our personalities and our compatibilities has proven enduringly popular. It's really not surprising then, and certainly not unreasonable, that those who find astrology compelling would require something a bit stronger than the old most theoretical arguments against it to convince them otherwise. But just as it was quite late before the Earth's motion could be measured directly, the statistical test, which furnished the most direct evidence against astrology, were developed only very recently during the 20th century, and the large data sets which give this test this persuasive power are only just now becoming readily accessible. Today, there are reference surveys such as this of Astrology, a critical review of 100 studies, which document decades worth of investigations, all of them agreeing against the claims of astrology and astrologers. Yet it remains the case that most of these tests are indirect. They demonstrate primarily that professional astrologers can't do what they say can do, not so much that astrology service is invalid.
In order to directly test astrology's core assertions, was needed most of all are large data sets of births recovered to the minute or at least to the hour, the kind of data that Beecher Gockley attempted to compile. Unfortunately, that sort of data even today remains difficult to come by, but it is out there. And it's my belief that as more to the minute birth data becomes available online, perhaps on websites devoted expressly to this purpose, it will become easier for people to submit astrology's claims to themselves. And who knows, maybe the benefit of larger data sets in using this, not unlike the ones we've applied throughout this book, the results may one day even be as clear as geometric proof. In the meantime, though astrology appears to be enjoying one of its small periodic revivals, especially as sapphire astrologers have learned to adapt the art to the internet. But I very much doubt that today's astrology will regain anything like the appeal it held even as recently as the 1970s. That was a decade when statistical methods were being applied as and misapplied in medicine and the social sciences in a major way, and when sensationalist interpretations of equivocal results could be reported in scientific journals just as glibly as on the nightly news. Dubious findings, such as Gauquelin's mass effect, seem to argue either that astrology was legitimate or, more disturbingly, that the methods being used in the sciences were somehow deeply unreliable. Not coincidentally, this was also a period when institutional science, God of God, found itself challenged as never before to justify its exalted role in society. Was there even such a thing as science, objective truth, and scientific method, or was the whole edifice nothing more than an expression of power? One small episode from that decade saw several of these trends come into conjunction. In 1975, the September-October edition of the Humanist magazine published a declaration titled Objections to Astrology, a statement by 186 leading scientists began. Scientists in a variety of fields have become concerned about the increased acceptance of astrology in many parts of the world. We, the undersigned astronomers, astrophysicists, and scientists in other fields wish to caution the public against the unquestioning acceptance of their predictions and advice given privately and publicly by astrologers. Those who wish to believe in astrology should realize that there is no scientific foundation for its tenets. Appended to the full statement were the names and affiliations of 186 scientists, beginning with the 18 Nobel Prize winners. This included Francis Crick, the co-discoverer of DNA's double helix, and Nash Bethe, who first worked out how the Sun and other star scientists heavier elements through nuclear fusion. The lead author was the Dutch American astronomer Bart Bob. Previously a president of the American Astronomical Society, Bob was at the time a professor at the University of Arizona in Tucson, where, not required for years later, Olivia Koski and I would be born. The article, with its impressive list of signatories, conveys an important and powerful message, and yet today it is mainly remembered not for who signed it, but for who didn't. Astronomy's most well-loved public ambassador, although personally asked to endorse the statement, reluctantly determined he couldn't. This was called Sagan. Sagan was a vociferous critic of astrology, but he objected to the objection for several reasons. First, because the tone of the statement was authoritarian. Indeed, the philosopher Paul Feyerabend at the time, a professor at Berkeley, made a similar observation and mocked the scientist's statement for how closely it matched the wording of the Catholic Church's 15th century condemnation of witchcraft. More substantively, Sagan objected to the statement's emphasis that there was no mechanism by which astrology would work. As Sagan noted, this point by itself is meaningless. The theory of continental drift he offered by way of example had been dismissed for exactly the same reason, and yet it subsequently became one of the fundamental pillars of modern geophysics. But I suspect that Sagan also intuited how contemplative and sealed the statement would seem to those to whom it was nominally addressed. Sagan recognized that what motivates what motivates those who turn to astrology is deep down a sense of curiosity and wonder. He recognized this because it was the same curiosity and wonder he experienced whenever he looked up at the stars. This basic human empathy was a big part of what made him such a gifted communicator. Sagan pursued science as an expression of his wonder, and he never made any secret of the fact that as a child his wonder had been sparked in part by reading science fiction novels like the John Carter of Mars series with exotic tales of extraterrestrial beings. Until the day he died, Sagan never stopped dreaming of making contact with intelligent extraterrestrial life. But it was precisely this point of reference that made Sagan eager to share with everyone what he had long ago learned, that the wonders of science's universe were so much more amazing than whatever fictions pseudoscience might invent. That Sagan, that, that Carl Sagan, the great evangelist of scientific wonder, was also one of the 20th century's great proponents of skepticism is no contradiction. Personally, it's this paradoxical quality that I've long admired most in him. To borrow a New Age notion, wonder and skepticism are like yin and yang, two seem opposites that must balance each other in creative conflict because if we are so quick to be deceived by falsehoods, how will we recognize true wonder when we see it? Conversely, what is the purpose of skepticism if not to prepare our wonder when against all the challenges what seems impossible actually proves true? For all these reasons, it's no mystery to me why astrology provokes such sub-emotions. At stake is not so much which truth is true, but where we should but where we should seek our wonder. To acknowledge science as a source of wonder is to acknowledge implicitly a profound depth to history and also a profound responsibility, for if we cannot faithfully preserve the knowledge which previous generations have hewed out of bleakest ignorance, then we will squander that wonder for the generations to follow. Nevertheless, and however well-meaning the motives, those who would amputate astrology from science history or set it apart for ridicule do nothing to preserve science or its history. On the contrary, they are being deeply unfaithful to both. To tell a messier story of how we know is not to diminish what we know, but rather to appreciate it all the more as something at once more astonishing and more humbling. The final frontier, astrology is an inseparable part of science past, and insofar as it still serves as a caution against the careless application of modern pattern matching methods, astrology remains very much a part of science present. But can astrology possibly coexist with science future? If that future is anything like what Sagan and other visionaries imagine, then it's only a matter of time before our species leaves the earth to inhibit. Other words, will we be bringing our astrology with us?
Putting the aspects of the stars and planets from other locations in the universe does not by itself pose any great challenges. In fact, Johannes Kepler worked through his problem in details far
back as the 1600s in an early work of science fiction called Somnium Adrien. Kepler examined what the heavens would look like to an observer on the moon by an incredible coincidence. This book, as announced on its title page, was printed in Sagan, a city in what's now Poland. Charmingly, Kepler wove his calculations into a story of a young boy from the island of Thule whose mother, a sorceress, in a fit of anger sells her son to a Persian ship captain. That captain in turn deposits the boy in Denmark with Tycho Brahe, from whom he learns the art of astronomy. Years later, upon his return to Thule, the boy and his mother are joyfully reunited, delighted by her son's mastery of earthbound astronomy. She uses her magic to summon a demon or spirit from the moon to teach her son the deeper mysteries of lunar astronomy. The stated purpose of Kepler's dream was to show that the hypothesis of a moving Earth presented no obstacle to astronomy. Indeed, the appearances of the heavens could be computed just as well, albeit with different results, from an observer on the moving moon. Kepler's investigations with the newly invented telescope had convinced him that there was probably intelligent life on the moon. He believed that the dark regions of the lunar surface, such as the Sea of Tranquility, were watery seas like those on Earth. But for the moon's inhabitants whom Kepler surmised must be giants, the skies would look very different. A lunar day and a lunar night, for instance, together last an entire Earth month. Meanwhile, the precession of the equinoxes, a cycle which on Earth lasts 2000 to 26,000 years, takes only about 19 years on the moon. Today we know that, contrary to Kepler's dream, the moon is sadly dry and lifeless. But the basic premise of Kepler's lunar astronomy remains perfectly sound. Updated versions of Kepler's lunar calculations can be used, for instance, to determine the precise arrangement of the heavens from Neil Armstrong's vantage point at the instant he set foot on the moon. This data can even be displayed as an astrolabe-style lunar scene of heaven, as in Figure 10.1, compared to the older scenes of heaven in this book. However, these are several important differences. For starters, the location of the Apollo 11 landing site is given terms of selenographic coordinates from Selene, the Greek word for the moon, which are determined with reference to the moon's axis of rotation. Additionally, the ecliptic cycle is seen to cling more closely to the lunar equator. This is because the obliquity of the ecliptic on the moon is only about 1.5 degrees as compared with 23.4 degrees on Earth. But the biggest difference is that there's now an entirely new heavenly body in the sky, the Earth. What does it mean, astrologically speaking, for the Earth to have been in Aries at that moment? This isn't a question astrologers has ever had to deal with before. To make things even more confusing, it's generally the case that observers on different planets will, at one and the same instant, perceive the different celestial bodies at different locations in the sky. Thus, an Aquarius on Earth, determined according to the Sun, might be a Gemini or Jupiter, or a Virgo on Venus and a Sagittarius on Saturn. How would anyone know which horoscope to read? Still, at least within our own solar system, the concept of a zodiac system based on solstices and equinoxes might conceivably be salvaged. But what happens when finally venture to stars beyond our sun? How could astrology possibly function? Astrology, it is worth to remember. Is worth remembering, especially to such cases before. First, when Hipparchus described the precision of the equinoxes, and second, when Copernicus and his successors dismantled the Earth-centered cosmos. In each instance, astrology not only adapted and survived but thrived.
such a stubborn insistence on seeing a correlation between the stars and ourselves. Similarly, I suppose the rules of a truly extraterrestrial astrology might, in principle, be worked out, but will they? What future stargazers will devote the time and effort, and with so many new cosmic wonders to explore, personally I'd be pretty surprised if astrology ever accompanies us beyond Earth's orbit, but considering astrology history, maybe the only reading I can give is that astrology's destiny, whatever it may be, is one which hasn't yet been written.